Joining us now here on Pittsburgh Sports Now is former Pitt beat writer and current Post-Gazette columnist and talk show host for 93.7 The Fan, Paul Zeise. Paul, football season, I know you're not part of the beat anymore, but with family connections, I know you're still into football big time. Getting back to your Pitt days, is there any part, I know it's a grind, you were one of the best in the business at grinding. Is there any part of you that misses that?
Yeah, I'm a grinder. That's what I do. I love being a beat writer. That's kind of what I am. I mean, that's what I am, really. I was moved to columnist position or whatever, which is what I do, but in this business, I've always really thrived as a beat writer. So I miss it, yes. Believe it or not, a lot of guys, they want to get off beats. I actually like being a beat reporter.
What was the best part about that? Just the relationships and just the challenge?
But I always think the challenges and being able to tell stories, and also being able to break stories is always and finding things out that they don't want you to find out. I just like to go after and grind and dig, and I will say it's a little different now than it was. There's really no access or hardly any access at all at Pitt for the reporters. They don't have as much access as we had back when I was covering the team, where you could talk to coaches anytime you wanted to, pretty much. I mean, just there wasn't restrictions on who got to talk and when they got to talk, and you weren't put into a room where everybody basically talked to the same people, so everyone has the same stories. You got one-on-ones. In fact, when I first started on the beat was with Walt Harris. Guys walking off the field, practice field, you just went up and grabbed them. You didn't even need, you just basically told EJ, hey, this is who we're talking to, but you just grabbed them coming off the field. So you could talk to anybody.
Knowing you for over the years, one of the guys that I know you had a great time on the beat with, and he was one of the media's favorites, and he was, I'm not sure how to describe his relationship with the fans. I think they liked him at the beginning, but at the end they got frustrated. Dave Wannstedt. What was it like being a beat writer for Wanney?
It was great. I mean, Dave Wannstedt, he first of all, he had a lot of access to him, I mean, he was basically like, look, you got a question, you ask me. Don't ask somebody else, just ask me. And he would answer them, often, really, as honest as he could be. He wasn't like insecure about having his, assistant coaches talk. He wasn't insecure that they might say something, you know what I mean? He was great, and he was a funny guy. Obviously, he's got a great personality, great storyteller. It was fun, I really enjoyed covering Walt Harris. I really enjoyed covering Dave Wannstedt. I actually enjoyed covering Paul Christ, And believe it or not, I enjoyed covering Todd Graham. I'm one of the few people in town that actually liked Todd Graham. He was really good to me. He was good to, me and my family. I mean, he was really good. I have no complaints. And frankly, 2 months before he left, he told me he was leaving. He couldn't work for Steve Peterson, flat out. So,
why did you like Todd Graham? Aside from him treating you nice, was there something that you knew right away that you would have liked covering him?
What I like about him is, when you strip away all of the Southern Baptist preacher shtick, you know what I mean, and all of the platitudes and all that stuff, when you strip that away, he's a pretty straightforward guy, and that's what I liked about him. There wasn't, a lot of games being played by him. If he said something, it's usually how it was, and if you asked him a question, he'd answer it. There were times when maybe stuff happened with his players and this and that and the other thing, that other coaches handle things differently. He was pretty straightforward. So, I mean, he was actually, although there was less access with him than there was with Wannstedt and Harris, he was actually pretty easy to cover. Again, I'm one of the few people in town that really actually I have nothing against him. And frankly, I understand why he left, because he felt like he was lied to by Steve Peterson about what he could get facilities-wise, what they were going to do to support him, all of that stuff. And it started when he first got there. He says, okay, we need, some, I think it was carpeting and some stuff in the South Side facility. And, Peterson, then all of a sudden, now that you're hired, signed on the dotted line, Steve Peterson was like, oh, well, I don't know if we have the funding for that. So Graham was like, okay, and went and raised the money himself. Well, that, of course, caused a rift because it was like, oh, well, because they have to get the credit for it. And Todd was like, this is what you told me you were going to do. If you're not going to do it, I'll do it. So I actually don't have a problem with Todd Graham. The best part about Todd Graham is anytime you want to get Pitt fans riled up, I just throw his name out there on Twitter or something, and the fan base loses their mind. He really, really is actually not a bad guy at all. And the other part of it is, I actually think he's a better guy than he is a coach. To be honest, I think he's an okay coach. I don't think he was nearly as great as all of the platitudes he would throw out would suggest. I thought he was a good, serviceable coach, but I don't think he was special. But I think he's actually a better guy. Again, Steve Peterson, in his mind, in Todd Graham's mind, Steve Peterson lied to him about what he was going to give him, how much support he was going to give him, and all that other stuff. So, you know what? His thing was, got to go.
One of the other special things about covering the beat for as long as you did was you were able to cover a lot of special players, great players, in fact. I was thinking about this. I've been trying to get a hold of you since Darrelle Revis announced his retirement because you covered him. If you had to, this might be hard, but if you had to name in order, Paul Zeise's rankings, if you had to name the 3 to 5 best players in order that you covered, not in the NFL career, at Pitt, who would they be? Start at whatever the highest, though, at 5 or wherever you want to go.
Well, okay, if we say 5 of them,
yeah.
The obvious ones that are easy: Larry Fitzgerald, LaShawn McCoy, Revis, obviously, Aaron Donald, and the 5th one is really difficult. I'd probably say maybe Scott McKillop. I think people forget he's out of that whole list, except for Larry Fitzgerald. Actually, out of that whole list, I think Scott is the only one that's a 2-time All-American. I mean, people forget that. When they talk about and I know we're going to talk about retiring numbers, but that's something that people forget when they start talking about retiring numbers. Is there are actually measurable ways to figure it out. Now, I'm going to say this though, for a 7-game stretch until he broke his ankle or whatever. So halfway through his freshman year, in the first 2 games of his sophomore year, I guess it would have been, I don't know that I saw a more dominant player than Tyree Young, and that includes Aaron Donald. And Tyree Young, people forget about him probably. Obviously his career didn't go the way you wanted it to, but Pitt, if you remember, in 2000. Started off the season, I think, 1-5. They finished 5-0 to get to 6-5, and then they won their bowl game against NC State. Phillip Rivers and NC State. There were at least 2 games that Tyree Young, from the nose tackle position, almost single-handedly won. They had him playing a couple other different positions, but they got the 1-5. They moved him into the nose tackle spot, and all of a sudden, he was just blowing up the inside line. So, very short window because he broke his ankle, and then he had the thing where he was up with Josh Lay or whatever up in Aliquippa, all that stuff. Very, very short window. But if you're going to ask me who's the most dominant player I saw for at least a stretch, it might be Tyree Young. People forget how good that guy was. He changed their defense completely. Teams couldn't block him. I mean, teams literally would have to have the center and 2 guards tied up with him to try and block him. He was that quick off the ball. He was just an animal. He was that guy. To me, I couldn't put him in the list of the top 5 just because 7-game stretch is what we're talking about. But boy, for those 7 games, he was really good.
Fitzgerald the best?
I will say this. I actually think LaShawn McCoy is the best player, and I'll tell you why. Larry was great, okay? But LaShawn McCoy, when he was at Pitt, think about the quarterbacks and the quarterback play he dealt with, and he was still, he basically single-handedly won that 13-9 game. They literally that season, they could not throw forward passes. They had a freshman, Pat. I mean, if people don't remember that season, right? They had Bill Stahl as their starter, and I thought Bill was probably better than he got credit for. I thought he probably took a bad rap. I thought he was a better player, but that year he was their starter. They had Pat Bostic came in, and he was a freshman that year, and like a week into camp or whatever, he left. Right. He was homesick or whatever, left. So he really wasn't there for all of camp. He came back, but by that point, he missed all of camp. Right. It was, well, we're going to redshirt him. The other guy they had was Kevin Smith, the kid from Seneca Valley, who's playing for the White Sox right now, right? He was a baseball kid. It was a complete 100%, let's take a shot at this kid because he's got a bunch of physical tools, but I think he only played like 9 high school football games. Right. He was not. Well, the first game, Bill Stahl's pulling out for under center. His thumb gets caught, snaps, he needs surgery. He's gone. They played that year with Kevin Smith and Pat Bostic as their quarterbacks. And they played the Michigan State game. This is when
I remember that.
Yeah, they played the Michigan State game. They would have won the game had they just punted on first down the entire first half. Because it was 17-13. Michigan State's all of their points came because of turnovers, including something I've never seen before and since, but they threw an interception on like one of those little laser screens on the interior. They threw an interception. I think it was actually returned for a touchdown or returned like to the one or something. I've never seen that before. But LaShawn McCoy, if you remember, that was the game where they said, you know what? We're better off just putting him in the Wildcat, let him play, and just to snap the ball to him. He was unbelievable. He carried a team that couldn't throw the ball. I mean, think about it. And so to me, what he did when he was here, I would put him as the best player that I saw. Now, obviously, if you look at what's going on in the NFL, Aaron Donald and Larry Fitzgerald are the two best, and maybe Revis. But in terms of what they did at Pitt, I don't know. I think LaShawn McCoy, for my money, is the best guy that I covered.
All right. Last thing is the topic. It's on, gets brought up every time a great player does something or retires or whatever. But the issue of retiring jerseys. You can't just retire everybody, because then you're going to have no numbers left.
Right.
But what would your criteria be in any of these recent? Who's the next player or players do you believe that if Pitt chooses to do it, who should get their numbers retired?
Well, I mean, I would say Aaron Donald would be next, to be honest. Look, I covered a lot of great players when I was at Pitt, okay? But that great doesn't get you your number retired. All time sort of does. And I think one of the measures that people should look at is All-American status. Mm-hmm. Aaron Donald was a consensus All-American. He won what, 2 or 3 of those major awards, right? That's special. Larry Fitzgerald was a consensus All-American. He finished 3rd in the Heisman Trophy voting and all that other stuff. I mean, if you look at all the rest of these guys that people want to retire their numbers, I mean, Tyler Boyd, I don't think he was a first-team All-American either year. I think he was maybe a third team Revis was not an All-American. LaShawn McCoy was not an All-American, although I could make an argument he should have been. He wasn't. Scott McKillop was a 2-time All-American, and H.B. Blades was an All-American, but they were both All-Americans for like 1 or 2 outlets. Right. They weren't consensus All-Americans. I mean, you had Aaron Donald and Larry Fitzgerald. Those were the 2 that were clearly. So if you ask me, I mean, they already have retired Larry Fitzgerald's number. If you ask me, the next guy that should be is Aaron Donald, because to me, retiring a number should be really, really something. This is a guy that did, things that nobody else really did or whatever. And you look at what Aaron Donald did, winning all those awards, consensus All-American, as great as you could possibly be. To me, he's the next one. I mean, I no disrespect to Darrell Revis. I think he was a great player. LaShawn McCoy was a great player. Scott McKillop was a great player. And frankly, if you want to make an argument, he probably has the next argument after all of them because he was a 2-time All-American. But I just look at it and say, Donald is really the only one they should retire number.
I lied. Last thing, I can't let you leave without this. Season starts it's going to be special for you because it's going to be the last time, who knows, that you see your son played. I remember being at KDK when Elijah committed, wide receiver, went through it all, how happy you were he stayed home. What's it been like, and just, from a dad's perspective, not a writer or anything like that, a media guy, what Elijah was able to, just everything academically on the field, and I'm sure he made you and your wife proud.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about it is it's so hard being a dad, really, because you can't step in and fix it for him. Parents want to, but you can't. And so, he's gone through a lot at Pitt. He had his first year, he had Christ, right? He was a receiver. Things were really good. They liked him. They had a, the offense he fit in, what they were looking for. And so the next year, now he's got a defensive-minded coach comes in with a different offensive staff. So now he's got his second coordinator in 2 years and a different coach. They want something different from receiver. And so they started having him play linebacker a little bit. And, he was out there and they just were like, it's natural for him. Let's try. He's a big athlete. Let's try and get him on the field. So they moved him to defense. I think what I admire the most about that is when I said to him, listen, you committed to Pitt because they were one of the few schools that said, hey, we'll let you play offense. So do you want me to get on the phone and find another spot for you, or this and that and the other thing? And he said, no, Dad, I grew up wanting to be a Pitt. I grew up wanting to play for Pitt. I love it at Pitt. I love my teammates. My friends are all here. I'm close to home. I get to play at Heinz Field. So if they're going to keep paying for my school, I'll make the most of it and try and figure it all out. That's a pretty mature decision. I mean, Nowadays in a day where everybody wants to transfer and everybody, wants to leave when things don't go their way, his thing was, what? I'm going to give it a shot. So and then he got hurt, so he lost basically an entire year, and that was really difficult. It was difficult to sit with him, and watch the Clemson game with him while his teammates are, winning an unbelievable game, and he's sitting on the couch, and it's tough. You can't fix it, and that what people don't realize, and I probably didn't appreciate it enough, is when you're an athlete and you lose the ability to play because of an injury. That's a very, very, very traumatic thing. I mean, he went through a depression. It was really difficult for him, just to be on the outside looking in, and knowing that this would have been a year I'd have been able to play a lot. They had me out on the field, so it's been a lot of ups and downs, but it's been fun to watch him grow and sort of mature. And I think taking my dad hat off, watching him last year. He stunk at the beginning of the season because he didn't know what he was doing. By the middle of the season, he had a pretty good idea of what he was doing, and he got better. I thought the last 4 weeks he played really, really well. I mean, just, as he played, it looked like he knew what he was doing. Obviously, he needed to, he needs to continue to get better. But my point was, watching him from the start of the season to the end, it was fun watching him grow and get better and kind of figure it out. So he's a smart kid, and, I'm obviously really proud of him. But I think, again, it's not so much that he's a football player or he's an athlete, this and that. The thing that makes me the most proud is his handling of all the adversity he's been through has shown me he's going to be all right in this world. He's going to make it.
All right. Thanks, Paul, for the time. Paul Zeise, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, 93.7 The Fan. We'll catch you down the road.